episode 11 of the Pit Stop Pals. What's going on, everybody? Nielson and Gage are back with you, and we are recapping a Grand Prix that happened right here in our homeland, Gager. What a time to be alive, buddy.
Oh, I heard that Jason Greger was going, and I felt like I wanted him to bring a hockey bag and throw me in that and see if I
saw a couple
there,
of his tweets from there, and I was just like, you bastard.
You prick.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Oh, the speed. Oh, I can't believe the speed. What a jerk. But no, it was great, man. It was awesome to watch. Totally different scenarios from the first day to the last day. One of the most interesting probably the most interesting race of the season by far, I would say.
And Gager, when you say most interesting race, we're not just talking about the race itself, right? Like, we're talking about practice. We're talking about qualifying, where qualifying, the conditions were completely different, which made it very entertaining. And then the race itself had a lot of intrigue and storylines throughout it as well. But you're talking like overall package of the weekend, aren't you?
We're Allen Iverson, baby. We're talking about practice. Like, it was amazing to see, because the weather conditions, and I have to correct myself, I think, Dusty, because last week I meant to say it's a street race, but that the track acts as a street race because it is a little bit more bumpy and not as, and a little bit tighter. It's a racetrack, but not a traditional racetrack in that type of sense. And really cool to hear the history of like that one wall where they call it Champions Wall, where it seemed like former champions also always seemed to crash into that, and tons of things. And for the first time, I was really kind of hoping for one of our Canadians to do well. And just to see them going through in the crowd, like some great signs for Latifi and Stroll. So, I mean, it didn't happen, but I mean, it was, and even that's probably one thing we got to talk about, because there was rumblings saying that Latifi might not be in the car when it goes back to Silverstone here.
Well, I mean, let's just start there right now, Gager. What do you think of those rumors, and does it make sense at this point?
Yeah, I think it does, because I mean, he just hasn't done well enough, and when he's crashing the car at times, and things just aren't working out well at all. And if you compare his success to his partner, it's night and day. It's just he's not doing well, and in that type of car, like they need to have some success. Not huge. I know it's not going to be massive in the Williams, but something's got to change. And I think they were talking. I read this thing. I don't know if it's true, but that Oscar Pistorius, I believe, a young Australian driver who's, by all accounts, the best driver not in F1 right now, could be possibility of taking that seat. So.
Yeah, Oscar Piastri, I think.
Piastri.
I've got some F1 cards of him that have popped up as F2 cards right now.
Yes.
I mean, it's not like Latifi hasn't had a shot, right? He came in 2020. He had 17 races that year. He had all of last year. He's got 9 races so far this year. Gager, he's got 2 top 10s that came back to back, Hungary and Belgium, I believe, in race 11 and 12 of last year. Outside of that, it's a series of 15, 16, 16, 17, 19, retire. Like, literally hasn't gotten anything out of that car.
But it's just the no. I'm not very optimistic he would finish in the points. You see where the Haas came, like I believe position 6, 5, and 6 on the grid to start. So there's this might be the time when they can finish. Like there's optimism there. I just don't like. He's still at 0 points. That's got to be a tough. I mean, it's obviously going to be a tough decision, but man, something has to be done, because it's definitely not working with Latifi right now.
All right, let's get to the race itself. Max Verstappen, when you saw how fast he was in qualifying, Gager, and then starting at the front with the group of you got Alonso there, and you got a couple of Haas cars up in 5 and 6 on the third row. I mean, I was telling my buddies, I was just like, hey, if you can find Verstappen to win by 8.5 seconds or more, you might want to hop on it, because that would have been the case if it wasn't for the safety car that ended up coming out and kind of grouping everything back together. So, for a moment there, Sainz, they're thinking, okay, maybe he might be able to do something. And then after the safety car, he pushed him a little bit, but Verstappen just too solid of drive. Not like I say he had it on cruise control, because there were some interesting strategies there. He lost his mind when he came out behind Lewis. He was pissed. So he had his moments in this race. It wasn't all a smooth ride here for Verstappen, but not a surprising result at all.
No, not at all. I mean, even from the first practice when it was dry out, and I guess one of the things that kind of hurts is they don't have any other like F2 and F3 don't race on the same track, right? So there's no opportunity to put some rubber down. So the track obviously got better over the days, but then the second day with the rain, and Max was just consistent through both. Like, it didn't matter what you put on for tires, he was just perfect the whole way through, right? And then even off the start, like, his start was perfect, right? He just blew ahead of Alonso right off the hop, and just keeping that gap. Great, cool to see the safety car, right? Like, awesome. But I was excited to see, just because the tire choices, right? I think Carlos had about 7 laps on him, and maybe we would have seen a little bit of
tires,
degradation.
Yeah. I wonder if that would happen. Yeah.
I was wondering if he was just, and he kept within DRS range the whole time, basically, for that final 16 laps. And just Max was just so perfect on every corner. Like, of course, Dusty, me, I threw the helmet cam on and watched, and just out of the chicane especially, Max was just like, it was the same every single time, just letter perfect, getting on the throttle and just keeping that distance where, if it was a longer straightaway, I think it definitely would have helped out Carlos to maybe lunge down the inside at some point going into the first turn. But yeah, it was too short, and Max was too good.
Okay, so what else from this race? Verstappen obviously wins, continues to grow his lead. Not a great race for Red Bull because of obviously what happened with Checo. Maybe let's just hit there quickly. Gage, did they sabotage him enough that Max will now just remain calm and cool the rest of the way?
I think they did something to Checo's car. I really do. And so Checo, he's just resigned to second now, and helping Max just finish and be champion for 2 years in a row here. I think Checo was driving too well and getting too close, and they just did. That's my conspiracy theory. We have to have a conspiracy theory on this, but really,
we'll wait for Drive to Survive to come out. We'll see what's really going on here.
We'll see what they say, but
Checo looked really good for a stretch here now, right?
Well, I hate to say it, because Checo is kind of one of my favorite guys, but to see what the Alpines are doing, Dusty, that's pretty impressive, even though it was a little bit of a disappointment from Alonso not being able to, starting and finishing 7th. But I think they did have some issues with the car, but really looking forward to what they can offer later on. Like, usually, from what they're saying, Silverstone is another place where some new upgrades will come and some changes to the car. And let's see if they can start battling for that, not the top, but, in that 3, 4, 5. It was a great race to see how close all these guys were for all the time. And even Carlos was saying it wasn't great to be in the dirty air behind, but he was able to stay in that position for so long. Whereas last year there would have been no chance. He would have had to drop back and cool the tires and cool everything else, and the brakes, everything else off, just because these cars are so well designed to establish that kind of racing.
You mentioned Alpine, so let's just quickly take a look at the constructor standings right now. You've got Red Bull at the top, 304 points, not officially running away with it, but very comfortable. Ferrari at 228. Mercedes is actually closer to Ferrari than Ferrari is to Red Bull at this stage now. Mercedes is at 188. We'll get to Lewis Hamilton here in a second. McLaren, despite really falling off lately, especially with Lando, they're sitting at 65 points. Alpine is right behind them at 57, and then Alfa Romeo is sitting there at 51. So, there's a pretty good battle shaping up there in that 4, 5, 6 spot, which means a lot to these teams. McLaren wanting to hang on and try to solidify that top 4 status. And then you've got these other teams that are pushing up there as well. Just quickly, because we're in that range right now, Gager, any thoughts on McLaren's weekend?
I was really disappointed just because of the last race with them finishing, I believe it was 9-10, right? So both in the points. Looked like Ricardo had regained some form and was quite optimistic about going into this weekend, and just nothing really there. It just they weren't competitive at all. It's so weird from one race to the next to have that much of a fall off compared to they were feeling quite good about themselves. So I'd say a real disappointing weekend for McLaren.
Since Zach Brown kind of laid out that, they might be trying to get out of Ricardo's contract, he's finished ahead of Norris the last 2 races. So,
yeah.
I don't know what that means, but I do find it very intriguing. I find that very interesting. All right. So it's a weird race. Charles Leclerc had to start where he started. Let's dive into that. And then, because I want to tie it all into Lewis Hamilton getting back on the podium. But Gager, obviously we've talked about the Ferrari car causing some issues here over the last little while. Carlos Sainz, a nice second. Leclerc ends up finishing 5th, which is huge for Ferrari to come away with 10 points for Leclerc where he was starting on the grid. But just your thoughts on how everything had been handled with Charles Leclerc this weekend.
I thought it was great. I mean, he did a phenomenal job of moving through the field. I think it was a little bit advantageous with the safety cars, but he took full advantage of it. He looked great, man. He was flying. He was flying. He got behind. I forget who he got behind there for a bit, but
I think it was
that
Ocon,
whole train,
wasn't it?
And yeah, it was Ocon, and then he went in and he got past Vettel again. But yeah, it was a great race for him. It was. I'm just glad the Ferraris actually got through the race, Dusty. Like I was just waiting for something bad to happen to their power unit. But I don't know. It's good to see that they're still kind of in the hunt here. They're going to have to do something really special to get to the Red Bulls here. But in a couple of weeks we'll see. It's more of a traditional racetrack, which will be cool and not so tight corners and like high speed corners. And I mean, we're going to talk about Lewis Hamilton. That's what he was most excited about for the next race, is obviously going home to his home track. He's going to get the majority of the support at that race, but just those high speed corners. And man, from Friday to Sunday, the emotional roller coaster of Lewis Hamilton from saying this car is undrivable, and then being basically on cloud 9, comparing it to his first win in Formula 1 15 years ago, finishing 3rd on the podium. So really great. I want to see Mercedes get in there and start. And I watched the press conference, and that's what Hamilton said most is I thought there was a chance to stay up, but they were just a little bit too fast, but we're getting there. And I can't wait to hopefully be battling with the Ferrari and the Red Bull soon.
Well, that's kind of where I want to go, because, I see it. I get excited about it. I'm like, okay, there we go. There's Lewis, 2nd podium of the year. Maybe, and there's a busy stretch here before summer break. Maybe they can get some of that momentum back. Mercedes isn't far. They're 30 points back of Ferrari right now, so they can get themselves into that mix. Is anybody catching Red Bull? I'm not sure. But then I think about it. I'm like, well, Leclerc had to start way back. Checo didn't finish this race. Is that any different than finishing 5th and 6th, which is what Mercedes had been doing all along as well, Gager? So from what you saw, and you mentioned a roller coaster ride here for Lewis Hamilton from Friday to Sunday, but from what you saw, are you thinking legitimate step in the right direction here for that Mercedes car?
Well, it's weird because they were from last weekend complaining about the bouncing and porpoising, and actually the FIA putting in regulations for the safety of drivers not having a certain amount of G-force on that bouncing. So protecting the drivers, which is good. But you heard Toto Wolff saying, yeah, we want support, but he goes, well, not too much support. We don't want the other teams to take advantage of this too. But from all accounts, it looked like what they did. It wasn't like Baku, but I think that straight was just a long, and there is still bouncing in that Mercedes, but it was a lot more manageable with this weekend. It's so weird. I think you gotta, it's going to take a few races for us. I know we get excited after one when Mercedes does well and looks like they're going to, but I think we got to give it 2 or 3 more where they're consistently in that upper echelon of cars, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and actually staying up with the lead guys for a little bit longer, not fading back right away, Dusty, because I'm optimistic. I don't want to get too excited about the whole situation.
Well, does the Mercedes whole situation that we talk about, does it really just come down to qualifying with who's going to end up finishing better? I mean, for the most part, Russell's been out qualifying Lewis Hamilton, and Russell's been finishing ahead of Lewis Hamilton. This week, Lewis Hamilton, because of the conditions, they tried to get him out there. Was it Russell went to the slicks and it just backfired. He couldn't put anything in. So he finished, started the race a little bit further down. And then Lewis kind of finishes where Russell had been finishing almost the entire time. Does it not basically just come down to Mercedes in qualifying?
Well, I
don't want
love
to simplify
the fact
too
that,
much, but kind of look at that.
Well, yeah, I don't know, because I love the fact that Russell took that chance on the slicks, to tell you the truth. I was like, this is great. Like, why not? But it was just too wet for them. But I like how he's put, like, he's trying to put himself in the best possible position to be on the podium, right? Like that's great. And man, it was getting close to where, oh my gosh, are they going to have to decide who finishes ahead here? But Lewis had way more pace than Russell did on the last 15 laps. Like, he was pulling away from him quite easily. So obviously a different setup with the car helped Lewis in the position he was. But I don't think it does, Dusty. That I think where the Mercedes car is now, I think it can consistently be in that top 5. It should be in the top 5 every race from what I see so far. So yeah, it matters a little bit, but we'll see in Silverstone if it's so close. Like, when you look at the times, it is quite close, but it's always the same time differential between Mercedes and Red Bull and Ferraris, for sure. And Alpines are there on the now too. So,
all right, Gager, is there anything else we missed from the Canadian Grand Prix that you want to get to?
What did I have here? Well, the one thing about the Ferraris is they were the fastest on track, right? So that's encouraging, just with the problems they had. But man, I love the weather changes for qualifying. What a wrench it threw in, and seeing. It
was awesome seeing a new grid, wasn't it?
Just to see who was there. It was like 5 different cars all in the top 5. That was great. And I think for me, Dusty, just watching the race completely and seeing how close everyone was following, and obviously the top guys moved ahead, but there was a lot of really good racing throughout that whole race, I thought. And this is hopefully getting to now, when it really gets into the traditional F1 tracks back in Europe. This is from all accounts and what people are talking about, this is when the season really starts. And if we look back to last year, this is when it really started heating up. Well, it was hot before, but with Lewis and Max, this is when it really went kind of crazy with them touching wheels. And I think Max had to go off there. So hopefully we see a lot more kind of battles between Ferrari and Red Bull, and maybe a little bit of more elbows out between the guys.
Yeah, it was interesting because I believe 2021 sprint qualifying at Silverstone, and they're not on that sprint qualifying schedule this year. So it'll be a little bit different because Max won the sprint qualifying. Lewis Hamilton ended up winning that race. Charles Leclerc finished 4th in that race. So maybe something to build on last year at this track, and coming off of a pretty good race that he just put into the Canadian Grand Prix. Let's wrap up with this thing, Gager. Storyline number 1 for you, heading from the Canadian Grand Prix over to Silverstone.
It's got to be Hamilton back on the podium, right? Just getting
home like that,
heading home, getting a little bit of momentum, feeling better about himself from the Friday to the Sunday. I think this is really good. And I mean, it doesn't get mentioned, and I know I'm talking about Mercedes a lot, but again, Russell finished 5th, Mr. Consistency. Like, he's keeping them in the hunt. It's amazing what he's been able to do over the past this whole season, just always finishing consistently in that top 5. So unbelievable job by them. And we'll see if I guess if Red Bull sabotages Checo's car for the next race. We'll see.
All right, that's going to do it for episode 11 of the Pit Stop Pals. If you've been listening and you're downloading it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, if you could leave a rating and a comment, that would be absolutely terrific. We have some new exciting things here in July with the Pit Stop Pals, so make sure you're watching for that as well. Gager, we'll talk to you in Silverstone.